Hey guys, we are in day 53 in our Bible reading plan, Leviticus 4 through 6 and Psalm 53. Listen, we're going to build on information every day, and I know that it's challenging to read through Leviticus, but remember, the point of reading through our Bible is not to read through Leviticus or to understand Leviticus even. It is to commune with God. God gives understanding, and God will use something in your reading to awaken you. So that's what I want you to focus on today in your prayers with God. Ask Him if you don't understand a thing. Tell Him. I've told Him that in the last 24 hours and kind of asking for wisdom what to share here. And so I want to give you the big idea. Without the shedding of blood, there's no remission for sin. And that is an idea that is throughout Scripture. It didn't start in Leviticus. In fact, the blood sacrifice was all the way back in Genesis after Adam and Eve sinned. Remember, God had to kill an animal, take the skin of the animal and clothe them. And then He ushered them out of Eden with putting cherubim over the garden door and then an angel guarding it, because He knew, God understood that He was holy, He is holy, and people were now sinful. And to stay in the garden would mean their death, imminent death. And so God had to usher them out. And then Abel understood that there was a better sacrifice than Cain. And then later Noah offered a sacrifice to God, and the smell rose up to the heavens, and God was pleased. And then Moses offered a sacrifice in Exodus. So we see this pattern. Remember Abraham, when he took his son, though he didn't kill his son, this idea of sacrifice was there. So we see this theme in Scripture. And so in Leviticus, God now dwells among His people, but He doesn't just want to dwell there. He wants to commune with them and to have fellowship with them. But the only way for man who's sinner, both in nature and in action, the only way for man to commune with God is to be consecrated through sacrifice, atonement. And so we yesterday read about the first three sacrifices: the burnt, the grain, and the peace sacrifice. And those were sacrifices that were regular. Think of them like food. But then the second two that we focused on today are the sin and the guilt sacrifice. Those were for remission of sin. When people acknowledged their sin, they would offer sacrifice. So those were not daily sacrifices necessarily. And the biggest of those was the Day of Atonement, that the high priest would go into the Holy of Holies and give a sacrifice also for the sin of the people as a whole, not just individual sin. Interesting note that there is no category for the unrepentant sinner. You can't offer a sacrifice for somebody who doesn't want it. And so I found that interesting. Every step of the sacrifices, every way of it, God makes different animals for different categories. In fact, even the rich versus the poor have different sacrifices. And so God takes into account that anyone who wants to draw near to God can, but it has to be done His way. And the whole point is for God to protect us, because that which is common and unholy and sinful cannot be drawn close to God. And so we're going to build on this. I think that's all I'm going to share for today. There's a lot that we could break down in terms of the symbolism, but just trust that even when you don't understand something, it doesn't mean anything. God still has a purpose in a way, and that applies to the reading of Leviticus, but also to so many things in our life. Sometimes we just don't understand the details. We have to trust God and ask Him to give us greater understanding as we live our lives one day at a time. All right? Praying for you today.